in the south. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever. An incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us.
We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you. Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
Will, please bring us up to date.
or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons,
Very, very curious.
we bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening, I'm Alex Armstrong, and this is Ben Leo Tonight. But don't worry, Ben will be back in a couple of weeks. He's taking some hard-earned time off with his wife and kids. Ben, if you're watching, have a good one, mate. But while Ben's away, rest assured that you're going to get the same forthright opinions that Ben bastions on this show from me. Coming up tonight on the show.
That case never crossed my desk.
A shame on both their houses. The Tories and Labour are playing a disgraceful game of politics while victims sit voiceless on the sidelines. And
very difficult for us to think we should take back people, Shamima Begum and others, and instinctively, it's not something I want to do.
yes, Farage under fire. We've got political heavyweights Ben Habib and Gawain Towler going head-to-head discussing Nigel Farage's position after he's allegedly faced misleading headlines and a slew of criticism. Plus,
should be the flag of my country that I proudly represent.
why was an Essex councillor heckled for standing up for veterans and democracy? Also,
no more empire, Vladimir, you use my language.
Well, Boris has got some strong words of advice for Putin. And we've got our star panel joining us to give you all their opinions on the stories tonight. We've got author and commentator Lewis Oakley, political consultant Suzanne Evans, and journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. Oh, and how do you think the victims of the LA wildfires would feel if they saw this?
Couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
All that and more. Get ready, Britain. Here we go. Have the two main political parties forgotten our brave veterans? But first, here's your news with Will Hollis.
Alex, thank you. Your top story at 9 o'clock. Nigel Farage has repeated a pledge that Reform UK will pay for an inquiry into the grooming scandal if the government continues to reject calls. Speaking at the party's North West conference in Chester, Reform's leader said the abuse of children in towns across Britain, predominantly perpetrated by men of Pakistani heritage, was the most unique evil of his lifetime. He used his speech to criticise both the Prime Minister and the Leader of the Opposition while renewing calls for a national inquiry into the grooming scandal and criticising division in the country.
Of living in two-tier Britain. Had enough of two-tier policing. Had enough of two-tier justice. Had enough of us all being divided up.
Well, that speech comes as 10 Reform councillors in Derbyshire leave the party over the leadership of Nigel Farage. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has warned the use of inflammatory language over grooming gangs risks vilifying entire communities. Meanwhile, Labour MP for Liverpool Walton, Dan Cardin, has called for a national inquiry, the first from the party to break ranks, urging Sir Keir Starmer to use the full power of the state to deliver justice. In Germany, the AfD has nominated co-leader Alice Weidel as Chancellor candidate. At a Congress live-streamed on Elon Musk's social media platform X, she promised to close the borders and abandon EU climate policy, pledging to tear down windmills of shame. Earlier, protesters clashed with delegates attending the Congress in Riesa. The right-leaning Alternative for Germany is polling at second ahead of the country's election in February. Ukraine says its troops have taken 2 North Korean soldiers prisoner in the Kursk region. Writing on X, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the wounded men who are fighting alongside Russian forces are being treated and transported to Kyiv, where journalists will be able to speak with them. Some 10,000 North Koreans are believed to be supporting Putin's armies in the defense of Russia after Ukraine's surprise incursion into its territory earlier this year. Carrie Johnson spent almost a week in hospital with flu and pneumonia, struggling to breathe. The wife of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson wrote about her ordeal on Instagram, that she had not yet fully recovered from a chest infection, saying her strong advice was to get the flu jab, thanking nurses who cared for her. The number of patients in hospital with flu continues to rise, quadruple figures of last winter. And finally, temperatures dropped to minus 18.7 degrees in the UK's coldest January night for 15 years last night. The Met Office says the temperature was recorded in the most northern region of the Highlands. It's expected to stay chilly throughout the weekend, with an amber cold weather alert in place until Tuesday. Well, today, football matches have been postponed. Meanwhile, in Derbyshire, gritters were stopped from working by 200 cars double parked on a scenic route near Edale. The County Council turned to social media, asking visitors to the Peak District to please move your cars. Those are your latest headlines. Now let's get you back to Alex.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
British politics sank to another new low this week. Both the Conservatives and Labour have turned this national epidemic of rape gangs into mere pawns in a political chess game. This isn't leadership, it's cynicism, and it's a betrayal of our society's most vulnerable. First, let's look at the Conservatives. They've pushed for a national inquiry into the grooming gang scandal, and I agree, an inquiry is absolutely needed. But let's be clear, their move wasn't about justice, it was about headlines and political point scoring. They chose the day Parliament was debating crucial child safeguarding measures that could have saved the lives like that of Sarah Sharif, a 10-year-old victim of our failing system. Instead of supporting these immediate protections, the Tories decided to play politics. They voted against the bill, lost their amendment, and in doing so, lost the chance to make real progress for children at risk. It wasn't just a misstep, it was a moral failure, leaving the victims forgotten again. But don't mistake my criticism of the Tories for support for Labour's position. They've completely repelled the idea of a new inquiry, claiming previous ones were sufficient. But sufficient for whom? Certainly not for the victims who still await justice. The heavily criticised independent investigation into child sexual abuse report only focused on 6 case study areas where there were no significant reports of grooming gangs. So is that sufficient in any way possible? No, not in my opinion. During the House of Commons debate on Wednesday, both sides' hypocrisy was on full display yet again. Labour implored the Conservatives to support what they called a crucial bill, enforcing strict party discipline with a 3-line whip, yet key figures, including the Prime Minister, didn't even show up to vote. How can leaders who skip votes on crucial legislation at a time like this lead our country? It is shameless. It seems to me that Labour are more concerned with their own political fallout than they are about real justice for the victims. Let's not forget, many of the front-bench ministers and secretaries of state are at risk of losing their seats to the Muslim vote. But more importantly, Labour could call a national inquiry today. Today. No vote is needed in the House of Commons to do this. Well, Reform UK, of course, have been critical of both major political parties. They backed the Tory amendment, but Nigel Farage called the vote insincere. Reform, of course, is the only major UK party to mention the grooming gang epidemic in their manifesto. And today, Zia Youssef, the party chairman, also recommitted to their earlier pledge, claiming that they will hold a private inquiry into grooming gangs if Labour doesn't launch a national one. Look, I want to be frank with everybody tonight. Reform will be under the same scrutiny to deliver on their promises, not just by me, but by you at home, the entire British public. Words will not cut it anymore. This scandal is not going to go away, no matter how hard political parties, MPs and the establishment try to brush it out of the public discourse. These victims will not be silenced again. We are giving them a platform and a voice, and we're not going to stop talking about it. These victims deserve better, they deserve justice, accountability, and politicians to act beyond mere words. If our political establishment cannot rise above petty squabbles to deliver justice, do they deserve the trust of you, the British people? I am now joined by former Labour advisor Matthew Torbett. Now, Matthew, as pressure's amounting onto the PM at the moment, look, is it a sustainable position he can hold himself into? We've got 76% of the public wanting a national inquiry. That's 3/4 of people. We've got mass amounts of the Labour Party membership also supporting a national inquiry. What's Keir Starmer going to do?
No doubt give in to an inquiry. I think the position is likely untenable and the pressure will become insurmountable for the Prime Minister. I think it's obviously a bit of a misstep that somebody's forgotten about 6 months ago in the original letter from Jess Phillips and the Home Office to Oldham Council. I think the line also won't hold that this could take up to 7 years And if you look at previous inquiries, you're looking at between 160 and 200 million pounds. I think ultimately it isn't necessarily about money, it's about righting wrongs, and sometimes money isn't the most important thing. And I think on top of that, this would likely be a much narrower review because you're looking specifically into Oldham Council, not decades of child sex abuse, much as the previous inquiry did back in 2022. So, no, I think the language is clearly softening. We saw Jess Phillips say only the other day that she would potentially look at a national inquiry if victims asked for it.
That's right, that's right.
I believe survivors is the preferred term for people that have suffered this sort of abuse. So I think that it's clearly softening. And what annoys me from a sort of political gamemanship point of view, because this is what's going on, is Labour are just falling into a trap, much like with Gaza, because they don't want to be seen to be giving up ground to Reform or the Conservatives, who can then say, oh, well, we caused them to do this.
Yeah.
Why don't you just... They should have got ahead of it on the Sunday shows, just gone, and gone, do you know what? We listen to survivors and we're going to do it.
You know, Labour only committed to implementing the independent reviews, recommendations this Sunday at 1 p.m. after immense amount of pressure from the press, from politicians on the opposition. Why are Labour not getting on top of this topic after, being the so-called bastions for women and children's safeguarding the last 14 years? Why is it taking the media to put pressure on the party? What's going on?
I think because, as you pointed out in your monologue, regardless of Labour, Conservative or anything, these girls and these survivors have been ignored by people across the political spectrum for the best part of 14, 15 years. They get treated as if, without people like Maggie Oliver and others bringing their voices to the fore. And actually, in fairness, someone like Charlie Peters, who has been banging this drum for at least 2 or 3 years before any of Elon Musk's sort of tweets, I think the reason they're putting out fires in other areas, unfortunately. We had right back in the summer the sort of donor gate and right the way up to now with Tulip Sadiq being up to a neck in it. It wasn't seen as a priority.
Something's clearly going wrong. We've had Dan Carden, MP, now call for a national inquiry. There's lots of people breaking rank. Andy Burnham, who's surging ahead in popularity of Keir Starmer. Is he finished? Is Keir over?
I think he was over before this, personally. I think I've always said, I said on election night that he would likely not last the full term. And I think the way that current trends are going, it's quite clear that at the moment Labour will not win in Scotland, which will put huge pressure on, especially after the hard work that Anas Sarwar has done north of the border. And for the first time in history, we won't win in Wales.
All right, yes. So look, what's it going to take? What's it going to take for the Labour Party, maybe just, the Secretaries of State, Downing Street, to listen and be more in touch with the public? Something's clearly wrong at the top.
I think this comes down to actually backbench MPs who aren't happy that I've spoken to, because, again, falling into the trap meant that with this vote the other day, the Tories were very cynical at putting a wrecking amendment in. And for those that don't know what a wrecking amendment is, even if Labour had voted for that amendment, that would have killed the whole bill. There wouldn't have been a national inquiry. It was all a bit of smoke and mirrors trick. However, I could already see, with that being announced, because they hadn't got ahead with it on the Sunday shows, that the Facebook adverts would write themselves. In every marginal constituency, you would have no doubt have had, and I've seen several of them, your local MP voted to not jail child rapists in your constituency. Well, how have you not seen this coming?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree more with you. But look, let's just talk about Jess Phillips, because she's the safeguarding minister. She's done a lot of work in her career over women, children, and this horrific topic. Why is she not calling for a national inquiry? Why is she not breaking rank? Surely there's got to be some conscience. I know people want their political careers, but is this above that?
Yeah, it is above that. I think the importance is justice and people feeling like there's an element of closure almost. No doubt these people will never get over this sort of stuff, but the idea that there has potentially been wrongs right, will go some way. But actually, in a way, if Labour was serious about this, it shouldn't even come down to Jess Phillips, because, as you'll know, one of the J report's recommendations was to have a children and safeguarding minister. We haven't had one of those because we've only just decided that we're going to implement the recommendations, and actually that minister would have been likely the one that would have brought an inquiry forward. I think it will soften. Jess will have her own thoughts. I've not spoken to her. It will come down to the Prime Minister deciding whether he lets Jess do it or not. So it's up to the Prime Minister.
Interesting stuff, Matthew. Thank you. That's all we've got time for. Now, as the pressure mounts on the PM to hold an inquiry, before I get the views of my panel, let's see what Reform UK leader Nigel Farage said earlier.
If by the end of this month the Prime Minister has not called a full national inquiry, then we at Reform UK will raise the money, appoint the people and do it ourselves.
OK, let's get the thoughts of my panel. Suzanne Evans, Lewis Oakley, and sorry, I've forgotten your name. I beg your pardon. Nina Mishkov. Thank you. Sorry, it's been an interesting night for me. Look, Suzanne, I'd like to start with you.
Yeah.
Look, Reform UK have come out and said they want to have a private inquiry. That's if Labour don't do one, they're saying. Is this just political point scoring again? Are they expecting Labour to cave in so they can say this?
You know, Alex, sometimes I really hate politics because I think this is politics at its worst, because it is too often just a political football being battered around at parties. I remember I got so excited, 2010, all those years ago, David Cameron became Prime Minister and he said, I'm going to put an end to Punch and Judy politics. And I thought, fantastic. Of course, it's got worse and worse and worse since then. And no political party will put an end to Punch and Judy politics. Just criticising the other side, whatever they say, because it's the other side. And this is going to be the same thing with if Reform have an inquiry, I'm afraid, because they can do what they like, but unless it's independent in the sense that it's cross-party, nobody will take any notice of the conclusions. And, of course, MPs from other parties, I'm sorry, with the best will in the world, because of this party political posturing, are not going to take part in a Reform inquiry. So, frankly, it's a waste of money, a waste of time. The government needs to have a national inquiry to look at who is responsible for this tragedy, this constant cover-up. And just watching Charlie Peters' report before this programme came on air, we were watching it, weren't we? You know, it was astonishing.
Quite sobering,
there
isn't
has
it?
quite clearly been massive cover-ups by people in authority who should have been protecting those kids, and they didn't. There does need to be a national inquiry, but I'm afraid, I'm sure, you know, the Reform one, it's pointless, frankly.
Nina, would you agree? Is the Reform doing this to political point scoring? And, you know, look...
Of course, Nigel Farage is the ultimate, consummate politician. He will take any point and run with it. He will see a little gap and he'll stick his dagger in. This is absolutely... Whatever Nigel Farage does, it is pure politics. You know, the trouble is these girls have been let down by men. They're probably let down by a father who abandoned them. I don't know what the proportion of single mothers are in this case. They've been let down by, obviously, the men who've raped them and abused them and groomed them. They've been let down by the police, who, when they went to the police, they were not believed because they were, you know, working-class girls and probably a bit stupid, or maybe they were drunk, or maybe they were drugged, because that's all happened. And they've been let down by everybody else.
Well, look, I agree. There's been, as I said in my monologue, you know, there's been failure after failure from all political parties, in my opinion. But look, Labour are still not calling for a national inquiry. Well, this is incredible. 76% of people.
Yes, but the thing is, we're very bad at inquiries because they tend to just kick the can down the road. They last years, they cost a fortune, and then nothing ever happens. Nothing changes. So let's, first of all, get all those 22 points, put them into practice, put them into law so that we can get that working. And I didn't vote for Keir Starmer. I'm not an apologist for him, but I'd something when he said, "Look, this is going to take till 2031." And then what? And then what? And in the meantime, nothing's changing.
But there's nothing to stop anybody implementing the J report recommendations and having a separate national inquiry.
Well, this is the thing, right? We can do both things at the same time, Lewis, surely, can't we?
Yeah, I think we should really be throwing the kitchen sink at this. When it comes to protecting young children, nothing makes Brits more angry and frightened than the thought that we are not protecting our children, that the people there to protect them, like social services, like police officers, are not doing it. Have a national inquiry, implement the things from the report, and set up a task force to go after the people now. When we saw the riots last year, the speed at which that was dealt with and shut down, and people were in prison immediately. Have that same energy, and that's what people want from a Prime Minister that says, this is not happening on my watch. There have been failings before.
But has anybody ever... I mean, was anybody ever jailed after the Jimmy Savile case? No. was what's going to happen with Grenfell? What's going to happen?
So do you think we need to actually look at how inquiries are done in this country?
Absolutely,
and then
because we're so bad at them.
There are loads of. I mean, I've done inquiries when I was a local councillor. You know, you remember one, the Tia Sharp case. You might remember when a teenager was murdered by her stepfather. And the report that came across my desk, I just looked at it and I thought, this is a complete whitewash.
Yeah.
But the council were very keen to try and sweep it under the table, was my view. And it wasn't until I started asking questions, but unfortunately, it still ended up getting swept.
We're going to have to wrap it up here, guys. Look, but you guys are going to be back with us in the next hour. There's so much more to talk about on this topic. Right, up next, is Farage's leadership under threat? I'll be joined by ex-Reform UK Deputy Leader Ben Habib and former spokesman for Reform UK, Gawain Towler. This is Ben Leo Tonight. That's going to be explosive, guys. Come on, you've got to watch. It's Alex Armstrong, only on GB News.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, in the first Film Awards ceremony of the season, the Golden Globes 2025, we need to get used to that, commenced overnight.
Stephanie Tetchy to talk about all of this.
Good morning.
Morning.
Well, we know the Oscars are like the creme de la creme of film award shows, but it's the Golden Globes which sets the trend, because who we see picking up on the Golden Globes, we tend to see picking up at the BAFTAs, at the Oscars. So last night was a good indicator of what's to come. I would say it was a big year for musicals. We've had this film, Emilia Perez, starring Selena Gomez, Zoe Saldana. It's about a Mexican drug cartel who changes gender, and it's an operatic musical. So the plot sounds crazy, and in fact, it's a musical as well. It was a big night for Demi Moore.
Oh, I love
At the
her.
age of 62, she's just picked up her first film award for The Substance, Best
Well
Actress.
done to her.
It's an amazing film. Ellie, I know you're a big fan of Wicked.
Yes, I watched it for the second time yesterday.
I think I'm about to watch it for the third time because it's that great. Last week, it eclipsed Mamma Mia to become the highest-grossing film for a Broadway musical. Unfortunately, it wasn't a big night for their acting, including Ariana Grande and Cynthia Erivo. They totally got snubbed for awards, but it did win Best Cinematic and Box Office Achievement Prize. It was a big night for the Brits. Baby Reindeer, Richard Gadd, he picked up for the Best Limited Drama Series.
I'm surprised at that, because Baby Reindeer's a bit dark.
That's a lot of people ask him, how has this film got so much success when it's based on a dark plot? And he says, you know what, it's basically human life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Michael Portillo. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Ben Leo Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong, only on GB News. Now, it's time for our head-to-head. Now, Nigel Farage has had a tough couple of weeks following multiple instances where support for the Reform UK leader has supposedly dropped. Last weekend, Elon Musk lit the match as he declared Reform UK needs a new leader, saying that Farage doesn't have what it takes. Then yesterday, gasoline was thrown into the mix after Mr. Farage said that he had been thoughtful when asked whether the UK should consider bringing back Shamima Begum. Then it also broke yesterday that 12 Reform councillors have resigned over claims that their leader was autocratic and disloyal. Despite these bumps in the road for Reform UK's leader, it was revealed today that they have surpassed 180,000 members, becoming the fastest growing political movement in British politics. But is Nigel Farage's leadership under threat? Let me know your thoughts by heading to gbnews.com/yoursay or tweet me at Alex H. Armstrong. I'm joined now by former spokesman for Reform UK, Gwaine Towler, and former deputy leader, Reform UK, Ben Habib. OK, look, guys, political heavyweights. This is going to be a great debate, I'm sure. But, Ben, I'd love to start with you. Look, you have been critical of Nigel Farage very openly, very honestly. Do you think he's got this wrong on Shamima, or is this just a alleged misleading headline from ITV?
Just to be clear, I haven't been critical of Nigel Farage. What I've been critical of is some of the things that are coming out of Reform UK and the constitution of the party. Now, that might be seen as being criticism of Nigel, but I haven't made any ad hominem attacks on Nigel. For me, it's all about policy and constitution. As far as Shamima Begum is concerned, I can see no case whatsoever for someone who is complicit in terroristic genocidal activity over a protracted period, however tragic her personal story might be, for her to come back to the United Kingdom, where we all know we've got a two-tier criminal justice system, and expose our civil society at vast cost to the danger of a woman who has demonstrated her antipathy to Western cultural values and everything in which we believe in this country. The whole point about reform, if I may say so, is to promote the United Kingdom, to protect the United Kingdom, to eliminate in the United Kingdom forces which are antipathetic to it. So why would we, particularly in a week when we've talked so openly about the South Asian ethnic origin, mostly of the gang rape gangs, welcome in any sense, or even consider, which I think is the word that Nigel used, the repatriation of a genocidal terrorist? I can't make any case for that whatsoever.
Right, look, I mean, Gwaine, look, listen, this has been a difficult couple of weeks for Nigel. He's been attacked by Elon Musk. They've been calls for him to resign. How's he going to bounce back from this? Or, you know, this massive surge in figures, in his membership figures, is that saving the day here? What's the good news?
I think the point you just made speaks for itself. The last 2 weeks, he's had, 4 major meetings up and down the country. At least on 3 of them, 500,000 people watching it live, as well as 1,000 or so people in the room. They've now had 50,000 new members since Boxing Day, none of whom, I believe, are joining because they want Nigel Farage to stand down. I think that's a rather preposterous concept. The polling today, in opinion, that comes out in Observer tomorrow morning, Reform are second in the polls. So it's rising in the polls, rising in membership, rising, therefore, in funding, getting huge support up and down the country, getting defectors. You mentioned some defectors away, but also getting defectors towards. And frankly, the idea that he should look to his laurels and he should be worried about some sort of coup against him, I think is for the birds.
And by the way, I agree with Gwaine. There's no chance of Nigel being dethroned. None. Partly as a result of the constitution of the party, because it's impossible to dethrone Nigel.
Nobody wants him to.
Well, look, hang on for a second. Zia Youssef hang on 1 second, Gwaine, because I'd like to come back to this. But Zia Youssef said, is it yesterday or today, that Reform is weeks away from its new constitution. Ben, would that change? Would that change your perspective on Reform?
The new constitution is designed to prohibit a change of leadership. It's impossible under the new constitution, even if it is adopted.
Come on, Gwaine, is that true?
Impossible. I don't think it's impossible. It's just, it's not easy. But there again, watching the chaos of the Tory party shows you having a reasonably easy way of doing things over the last 5 years has been a disaster for the country. So I don't have a huge problem with that. It is possible. Frankly, if Nigel lost the confidence of the membership, this hugely increased membership, and there was the proper rumblings, rather than people outside the party pointing at him and saying, you should do things that we want you to do from outside, if there was an internal problem of that sort, I think that he's not a fool. If the days were numbered, he'd go, because he's got plenty of other things to do with his life. So I don't think that's a huge problem.
But the problem,
vastly improved. Yep.
The problem, Gwaine, if you don't mind me saying so, and by the way, Gwaine and I are really close friends, so this is not going to be a vitriolic head-to-head. But the problem with Nigel going is that reform is Nigel. Nigel is reform. If you want to form,
may have been true.
I don't think it's true going forward. If you want, well, I don't see many new faces, voices evolving. I don't see a shadow cabinet. I don't see the makings and the structure.
This is because they've only got 5 MPs, surely, Ben. This is only because they only have 5 MPs.
It's got nothing to listen. It's got nothing to do with how many MPs you have.
Rupert Lowe is now a significant figure in public debate.
It's got nothing to do with.
Just one at a time, please. One at a time. Let's go to Gwaine. Go on.
Richard Tice still has a loud voice and a successful voice, and I think what you're seeing growing. And you're right, we don't have a shadow cabinet as of yet, but it's very hard to do with 5 MPs. But I do think that you're seeing a growth. We haven't had elections since June, amazingly, and because of that, it's hard to say these people are in a position to take up those roles. But with people like Nick Candy coming as treasurer, I think it's silly to say that you don't see an improvement of quality, an improvement of ability coming through. I can see internally.
Well, Ben, on that point, Nick Candy, there's some people criticising the party for taking on Nick Candy. Would you agree with that criticism? He's too soft, he's too Tory?
He's worse than Tory. He counts Blair and Mandelson as his friends. He claims Mandelson is one of the greatest political minds ever. Mandelson is, as far as I'm concerned, at least twice removed from the Labour Party, morally corrupt, devious, cunning, reptilian organism. And he should be nowhere near any form of...
Just to say, Peter Mandelson is not here to defend himself. Sorry. Go ahead, Gwaine.
I don't think you can defend yourself against that kind of opprobrium that I've just levelled against him.
No. The point is just, and I'm not wildly disagreeing with you, Ben, on his moral turpitude. However, to say he's not an effective political operation, a very able politician, would be wrong.
But you wouldn't want someone in reform.
One at a time, guys.
I held no candle for Tony Blair, but I accept that he was a bloody good politician. To just write people off because you don't like their politics, as if they're not good politicians, well, they are. I've never believed that all politicians should be some moral paradigm.
Okay, guys, listen, I'm going to have to leave it there. Guys, sorry. I'd love to have this debate go on all evening. You've both been brilliant. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm sure we'll do this again another time. Thanks, gents. Take care. Have a great evening. Up next, though, should Labour be cozying up to China? China, that's right, China. I'll be joined by author and China expert Gordon Chang. This is Ben Leo Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong, live on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Some of us did manage to see some sunshine today, but others have been seeing quite persistent fog, and that'll be lingering overnight and into Sunday, particularly across areas of eastern England. It is going to become quite dense overnight. Northern Ireland as well could see some quite widespread fog by the time we reach Sunday morning. There'll be a spot of drizzle from some of this cloud in between, but if you hold on to the clear skies in the east, it is certainly going to be a very chilly night. A frost here, but something a touch milder to start off the second half of the weekend further towards the west. And we really do have a quite noticeable east-west split in conditions as we head throughout the day. That frost and fog will be lingering into the morning for those eastern areas, but you'll notice how different those temperatures are further towards the west, 7-8 degrees Celsius. Do be aware of this fog as it continues to persist into the daytime. There could be some travel issues around if you are heading outside at all, but again, another east-west split across parts of Scotland as well. Particularly in the west, the winds are going to start picking up as we head throughout the day. Gales developing for the Outer Hebrides and parts of the Highlands as we move towards the afternoon and evening period as we see outbreaks of rain arriving here. It'll be a calmer day for England and Wales, and there will again be some sunshine once the fog eventually clears its way off. But temperatures will struggle here again, 3 to 4 degrees Celsius for some of us, but again 7 to 8 possible further towards the northwest. And as we head into Monday, the pressure system squeezing together will provide a very strong southwesterly wind. So it is going to turn quite gusty for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but it's also going to be fielding in some much milder conditions with these outbreaks of rain. So throughout the next week, we're actually going to have a noticeable north to south split in our temperatures. Not the one you'd normally expect, because in fact it is going to be the northern areas that see the mildest conditions, reaching double-digit figures as we move into the week, but still around average in the south. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
Thank you, Britain.
Thank you for watching.
Thank you for listening.
Thanks for subscribing.
Thank you for your support.
It's you that make us the People's Channel.
As we reflect on our journey so far, we're filled with immense gratitude.
You mean the world to us. We couldn't have reached this point without you.
As a very special thank you, we are giving you the chance to win one of 50 GB News thank you boxes. They're worth £50 each.
For full terms and conditions, and to enter, just go to gbnews.com/thank you.
Welcome back, I'm Alex Armstrong. Now, the Chancellor says there's no choice but to engage with China as she seeks to restart Britain's formal economic relationship with the nation. Let's take a listen to what she's been saying in the past few hours.
The fiscal rules that I set out in my budget in October are non-negotiable, and growth is the #1 mission of this government, to make our country better off. And that's why I'm in China, to unlock tangible benefits for British businesses exporting and trading around the world, to ensure that we have greater access to the second biggest economy in the world. And when we have these pragmatic conversations with Chinese leaders and indeed with Chinese businesses, we will always be acting in Britain's national interest.
Well, Rachel Reeves continues to face widespread criticism over her decision to go ahead with the visit, as borrowing costs have surged to a 27-year high, and fears about the economy flatlining are intensifying. At a time when every other G7 nation has imposed tariffs on Chinese electric cars and most countries' relationships are becoming frostier, my question is, should Labour be cozying up to China? I'm joined now by author of The Great US-China Tech War and the Coming Collapse of China, Gordon Chang. Gordon, thank you very much for joining me. Now, look, the Chancellor's coming under intense pressure. Of course, the UK's economy looks like it's in a nosedive right now. But I want to ask, what would Donald Trump make of this visit, the incoming president-elect?
I don't think that he'd like it because it would undercut his diplomacy. But I think his diplomacy is also misguided because, unfortunately, you can't have responsible conversations with China. We've tried that throughout this century, and they have all failed. The only way to get results from China is to impose severe costs on Beijing, and then Beijing will see it in its interest to have those discussions. But, going over to China like Rachel Reeves is doing is really not going to be a solution.
I mean, so, the previous Prime Minister, the Conservative Prime Minister, David Cameron, has now come under sort of historic, let's say, criticism for his relationship, selling out swathes of London properties, opening the door to our economy being surrendered to the Chinese. How does Britain, a rather small nation these days, protect itself, particularly now as we're looking to create these trade agreements all over the world post-Brexit? How do we protect ourselves from the ever-growing arm of China?
I don't think that any country has been able to successfully protect itself from China, with maybe the possible exception of India, which has severed important links. And that has given China the incentive to actually talk to New Delhi in ways that are different than the ways it talks to, for instance, the United States or the EU. So unfortunately, in the West, we have a sort of an ideological bias towards these quote unquote constructive discussions. But, over the course of time, they just have not worked, even though they sound responsible to the ear. they have just proved to be failures.
Yeah, you look, I mean, China is one of the biggest economies in the world. How do we not trade with them? Obviously, there's criticisms on their treatment of the Uyghurs in China, their human rights record. This Labour government has been a moral, been sat on its sort of high horse, at least, when it comes to protections around the world and human rights. How do we rectify that? How do we work with a nation that, of course, is one of the biggest economies in the world? We have to work with them. How do we do that in a way that doesn't jeopardise our values?
Well, first of all, you can't, because China is committing genocide. There is atrocities, crimes against humanity, and, of course, the aggression towards its neighbors. But the point right now is, although it would sound like everyone in the world has to deal with China, the problem is the Chinese economy is in dire straits. We see that it's not growing at the 4.6% pace that they claimed for the third quarter of last year. It's probably about zero. And what we see are trends heading downward, and really no practical solutions from Xi Jinping. So the problem is, I don't think you can have good commercial relations with China right now.
So would you say the Labour government has got the wool pulled over its eyes when it comes to China, and they're just going over there and China's going to sell China, but actually the outcome for Britain could be horrendous, particularly as you predicted the Chinese economy may collapse?
Yes, right now, you hear Rachel Reeves talk about, well, we want to even up the playing field. We want to have good relations with China. And yes, Western leaders have said that for decades. But it's just right now with Xi Jinping closing up the Chinese economy, with him sort of taking almost semi-emergency measures, it's just not possible to have those type of commercial benefits for Britain or for any other country at this particular time.
Do you think, as a result of us trading closer with China, that Trump, who's been very tough, talking tough on tariffs, might actually make it worse for the UK if we continue to move eastward?
Well, I think so. And I think that also the EU might find that you're undercutting their diplomacy as well. So, China always tries to pick out a country that it feels particularly vulnerable. But in the long term, Beijing's relationships with those countries don't work out well, except for China.
Interesting. Well, look, thank you so much for joining me tonight. Lots to chew on there for Rachel Reeves. Up next, do the main parties even care about our veterans anymore? I'll be joined by Reform UK councillor Jamie McIver. But next, your weather.
I hope it doesn't rain.
Don't worry about it.
It'll spoil our holiday.
Relax, we're totally covered.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
For anyone looking for winter sun, I can report very mixed conditions across the Med. Unsettled in Italy with showers in Greece, but across much of Iberia it's fine. Plenty of sunny skies, breezy towards the Canaries. And we've got this area of low pressure moving through Italy. That's going to bring unseasonably windy weather and outbreaks of rain with snow over the mountains. Meanwhile, showery conditions and a strong wind, but mild for Greece for the time of year. And then it turns more settled widely across the Med next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News Travel Destinations forecast.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Have you noticed that more and more stores are closing? Well, last year, apparently 13,000 stores closed for the last time on the high street.
Well, experts warn the worst is still to come for our small businesses.
Well, let's talk to retail expert Jeremy Baker. Good morning to you, Jeremy. How bad is it and what can be done?
Well, nothing can be done about it. Retail is like that. It's boom and bust operation. So last year, let's say you had a shop and it was booming. This year, the consumer can just change their mind. They don't need to come back to your shop ever again.
Well, it is sad, Jeremy, because our high streets are the beating heart of our communities, aren't they? And for many people, I know I can relate to my high street, it is such a depressing sight, walking down there and seeing them all boarded up and closed down.
But how often do you walk down the boarded up high street? I think people move on to something else. The online world is very big. Yeah. And lots of other things are very exciting. And so people, the shop, I like to go to my GP in a shopping centre and get my tests done there rather than tramp off all the way to the GP. For example, and children could go to little schools in the high street. I've seen that happen already. So lots of things could happen to the high street. It could be much more social centre, much more kind of like pubs, coffee shops, all that. Charities. I don't see anything wrong with charities taking over, but the idea of the shop-centred high street finished, that's gone, never coming back. Goodbye. It's not sad, it's just life.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently. It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it? It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial. And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born. It's everything you need to kickstart your evening. Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it. That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, I'm Alex Armstrong. Now, Conservative and Labour councillors were allegedly filmed laughing and shouting at councillor Jamie McIver as he was sharing how he feels about veterans, sharing veterans' opinions about how they feel about cancelling the election. Take a look at this.
Remember men and women who have died for this country to give us the right to vote, the right for democracy to prevail. We are serving those people disservice to their memory, the lives that they have lost. We serve them a disservice when we say democracy doesn't matter when money is involved. And I will wrap the flag of my country that I proudly represent.
Well, you only got to see the back of his head, but we're actually joined now by the councillor for Ongar, Jamie McIver. Jamie, thank you so much for coming in.
Thanks for having me.
Well, look, I mean, you know, this is a big thing that's been talked about in the national press, devolution across the country. Labour have shoved that in right at the top of their political agenda. That's led to some councils cancelling elections. Talk to us a little bit about what that means for Essex, where you are.
Well, what it means is yesterday the council voted to say that they wish to express an interest in going ahead with devolution and other local government reorganisation, and they also had a choice. They had a choice to ask if elections are to be cancelled. It's a government decision, ultimately, a Labour government decision, but the Conservative-run council, and with support from the very small Labour group, which I imagine will get very much smaller soon, decided to ask and actually vote to ask for the elections to be cancelled in May.
Right, and listen, your speech there, you were standing up for veterans. You've got the flag with you. I don't know if you can see that on the desk. You can hold up the flag.
I can, yes.
Got that famous flag now with you.
There's no better flag I can think of. The England flag, obviously, being a proud Englishman. But I wanted to wrap the petition. Over 4,000 people signed a resident campaign. Tom Allison, really enthusiastic Essex resident, did the petition, and it got thousands of signatures.
Incredible.
And I wanted to give a visual to councillors in that chamber. You know, I actually asked the question, are you all whipped to vote for this through? You know, because often we know that councillors vote a certain way because they're told by the leader. You know, insecure leaders sometimes say, you know, if you don't vote for this, you know, this will happen to you or whatever. So I thought I'll give everyone a visual reminder that we live in the United Kingdom of Great Britain, Northern Ireland. Democracy is part of the fabric of this country. We have long-standing local elections due in May. Thousands of people in the county of Essex want them to go ahead. So as you vote, here's a little visual reminder of the responsibility you have with you today. And sadly, they all decided to have a different view, with the exception, I must give some decent credit where it's due. the Liberal Democrats on our council actually put in an amendment to try and make sure we had elections in May. That was supported by some of the independent councillors, Residents Association, myself as the only Reform councillor. Most frustratingly to be the only Reform councillor on Essex County Council at the moment, because I think actually a few more reformers in that chamber and democracy would have had a bit more of a say.
Well, do you feel that perhaps, you know, the reasons why some of these councils are voting because they're scared of a damning electorate on the way the political establishment is at the moment? I mean, obviously, Robert Jenrick, by the way, he said that we should only be cancelling elections in exceptional circumstances. Do you agree with that?
I completely agree. I mean, to be honest, it has to be a very exceptional circumstance. And, you know, I am very, very, very convinced, actually, you know, just as somebody that canvasses all the time. I speak to my residents all the time. I travel the county talking to people. I actually did a tour of Essex ahead of this vote, and I asked people in Harlow, in Basildon, in Malden, in Colchester, what do they think about the idea of cancelling elections? You know, the number one thing people said was they're just scared of reform.
There you go.
You know, people are seeing right through this. You know, I can't categorically say that's the council's corporate reason for doing it, but what I can say is that we had a by-election just recently in Essex. Reform came in straight away, 35%, in one of the safest Conservative seats in the county of Essex. The Tories did the most embarrassing. I mean, their campaign, I described it as an Eton mess, because that's exactly what it was. It was a total mess, and they only just won with 300 votes. And as a Democrat, I congratulated the successful councillor, of course, at the council meeting this week. But what is so clear to me is Reform do pose a threat. Their popularity in Essex is particularly strong, and I just think a lot of councillors are too cowardly to face the electorate in May.
Yes, well, that may very well be the case. But, you know, the government are saying, and I assume these Tory councillors may also say, that devolution is going to help create jobs, productivity, growth. I think you may even get a mayor at some point, so a new elected position. So is this just not party politics by reform?
Alex, you know, we've got so many problems in our country, and the answer's always been more layers of politicians. Always, you know, in the history of this country, you know, whenever we've got big problems, you know, more politicians and more politicians with more power has always been the answer. But I will be fair here. If devolution is something that this Labour government are hell-bent on doing, which it would appear they are determined to do, and very conveniently just before the elections in May, if that's the case, then obviously it's right Essex is at the table and we get as much out of Whitehall as we can. You know, I do believe, I have very little time for many people that work in Whitehall, because I look at the state of our country at the moment and I think, what have you lot been doing? But if we are going to take power from Whitehall and put it into Essex and have Essex residents voting for Essex representatives to make decisions, then I think that's a positive thing. If handled correctly, devolution can be good. But what I have to say is I'm very worried about the historic nature of our county being broken up. That's a worry.
That's really interesting stuff. Jamie, thank you so much for coming in. Insightful stuff. Right, well, the leader of Essex County Council, Councillor Kevin Bentley, has said, despite our differing political views, we all want to make Essex as great as it can be for our residents and businesses. Devolution is key to making this happen. It presents us with an opportunity for growth and productivity across the county like no other. All right, still to come, Wes Streeting went on the attack over rhetoric used to describe Pakistani rape gangs. He claimed that the ongoing rhetoric risks inciting mass violence, similar to that of New Zealand mosque massacre. Is he totally out of touch with reality, or raising a valid point? Well, maybe we'll find out. This is Ben Leo Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong, only on GB News. Now, your weather with Jonathan.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Some of us did manage to see some sunshine today, but others have been seeing quite persistent fog, and that'll be lingering overnight and into Sunday, particularly across areas of eastern England. It is going to become quite dense overnight. Northern Ireland as well could see some quite widespread fog by the time we reach Sunday morning. There'll be also a drizzle from some of this cloud in between, but if you hold on to the clear skies in the east, it is certainly going to be a very chilly night. A frost here, but something a touch milder to start off the second half of the weekend further towards the west. And we really do have a quite noticeable noticeable east-west split in conditions as we head throughout the day. That frost and fog will be lingering into the morning for those eastern areas, but you'll notice how different those temperatures are further towards the west, 7-8 degrees Celsius. Do be aware of this fog as it continues to persist into the daytime. There could be some travel issues around if you are heading outside at all, but again, another east-west split across parts of Scotland as well. Particularly in the west, the winds are going to start picking up as we head throughout the day. Gales developing for the Outer Hebrides and parts of the Highlands as we move towards the afternoon and evening period as we see outbreaks of rain arriving here. It'll be a calmer day for England and Wales, and there will again be some sunshine once the fog eventually clears its way off. But temperatures will struggle here again, 3 to 4 degrees Celsius for some of us, but again 7 to 8 possible further towards the northwest. And as we head into Monday, the pressure system squeezing together will provide a very strong southwesterly wind. So it is going to turn quite gusty for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but it's also going to be fielding in some much milder conditions with these outbreaks of rain. So throughout the next week, we're actually going to have a noticeable north to south split in our temperatures. Not the one you'd normally expect, because in fact it is going to be the northern areas that see the mildest conditions, reaching double-digit figures as we move into the week, but still around average in the south. Bye-bye.
Despite the morning rain, it'll be a nice, warm, cosy day ahead. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
You could be joining the Great British Giveaway list of winners with your chance to grab a fantastic £50,000 in tax-free cash.
Hi, I'm Angela from Wigan and I won £30,000 with the Great British Giveaway. I'd say to people who want to enter or are wondering whether to enter to do it, it happens to people like me.
For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start from just £2. You can call 0903 681 3232. Calls cost £2 plus your network access charge, or post your name and number to GB10 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 6 p.m. on the 31st of January. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand. Good luck.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Before she even met Prince Harry, her passion was sharing recipe tips, lifestyle, wellness techniques, because she had a blog, quite a successful blog actually, called The Tig. Of course, that had to be shut down when she became a working member of the royal family. We all know the turmoil that happened with Megxit. Now that her and Harry have come out the other side of that and have signed multi-million-pound deals with Netflix and others, this is the proof in the pudding, pardon the pun, and it is basically, I suspect, the TIG 2.0, because we've got everybody, she has managed to get everybody talking about this. You know, the royal family has been dragged through turmoil over the last few years because partly due to Harry and Meghan's decision, partly due to the royal family's decision, but this is kind of what's come out the other side.
Which is a load of nonsense. I mean, in fact, because it's all totally fake, isn't it? I mean, it's not her house, it's not her kitchen. She clearly doesn't spend her days picking strawberries and collecting honey from bees. I mean, the whole thing's just a fabrication.
Well, it's Netflix fantasy, isn't it? So I think any lifestyle programme such as this tends to not be filmed in the host's house. It's reportedly a $5 million rented house. The cooker itself is worth about $15,000. Even the pans are about $80 as well that she is using. So yes, Stephen, you're right. It is kind of fake and fantasy, but then, of course, that's how these lifestyle programmes are made. It's whether the question will be when you watch the series, if you decide to watch the series, is Meghan trying to portray herself as this authentic self, or is she going to make it clear that, you know, this is just like the best bits of her life? But she's got lots of celebrity friends involved in it, including her makeup artists and others as well. Prince Harry makes an appearance.
Of course he
does. Yeah.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good evening, I'm Alex Armstrong and this is Ben Leo Tonight. Don't worry if you're just tuning in, Ben is going to be back in a couple of weeks. He's taking some time off with his wife and kids. But rest assured, I'm still going to be as honest and straightforward as Ben while I'm covering this show. Coming up tonight...
Most of the victims were white. Most of the abusers were ethnically Pakistani. Fears of being seen as racist had contributed to a cover-up.
Health Secretary Wes Streeting says rhetoric around grooming gangs risks inciting mass violence. Is this more deflection from the cruel truth or a valid concern? And...
my country that I proudly represent.
Why was an Essex councillor heckled for standing up for veterans and democracy? Plus...
We have democracy?
Well, I don't know. Yeah, are you? My question is, are you worried about democracy?
Where? Well, it turns out quite a lot of people think Elon Musk is a bad influence on British democracy. What do you think? Is it time to butt out? Oh, and what's going on here?
No more empire, Vladimir, you use my language.
Yes, Boris has some very strong words of advice for Putin. And as always, we've got our star panel joining us to give you their opinions on all the stories tonight. We've got author and commentator Lewis Oakley, political consultant Suzanne Evans, and journalist and broadcaster Nina Mishkov. Oh, and how do you think the victims of the LA wildfires would feel if they saw this?
Couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
We've got a big hour, all that and more. Get ready, Britain, here we go. Is Elon Musk a risk to our democracy? First, here's your news with Will Hollis.
Thanks, Alex. Good evening. At 10 o'clock, a Labour MP is the first to break ranks and call for a national inquiry into the grooming scandal. Dan Carden, the MP for Liverpool Walton, urged Sir Keir Starmer to use the full power of the state to deliver justice. Speaking to the Liverpool Echo newspaper, he called it shocking that crimes may have been covered up to avoid confronting racial or cultural issues, adding calls for an inquiry were not an obsession of the far right, urging others in the party to speak out. Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has repeated a pledge that Reform UK will pay for an inquiry into the scandal if the government continues to reject calls. Speaking at the party's North West conference in Chester, Reform's leader said the abuse of children in towns across Britain, perpetrated predominantly by men of Pakistani heritage, was the most unique evil in his lifetime. He used his speech to criticise both the Prime Minister and Leader of the Opposition while renewing calls for a national inquiry and criticising division in the country.
Of living in two-tier Britain. Had enough of two-tier policing. Had enough of two-tier justice. Had enough of us all being divided up.
Well, that speech comes as 10 Reform councillors from Derbyshire leave the party over the leadership of Nigel Farage. Meanwhile, the Health Secretary has warned that the use of inflammatory language over grooming gangs risks vilifying entire communities. To Germany, the AfD party has nominated co-leader Alice Weidel as Chancellor candidate. At a congress live-streamed on Elon Musk's social media platform X, she promised to close the borders and abandon EU climate policy, pledging to tear down windmills of shame. Earlier, protesters clashed with delegates attending the congress in Riesa. The right-leaning Alternative for Germany is polling at second ahead of the country's election in February. The SDP's candidate, Olaf Scholz, warns that other parties wanted to take a chainsaw to democracy. In other news, Ukraine says its troops have taken 2 North Korean soldiers prisoner in the Kursk region. Writing on social media platform X, President Volodymyr Zelensky said the wounded men who are fighting alongside Russian forces are being treated and transported to Kyiv, where journalists will be able to speak with them. Some 10,000 North Koreans are believed to be supporting Putin's armies in the defence of Russia after Ukraine's surprise incursion into its territory earlier this year. Back in the UK, Carrie Johnson spent almost a week in hospital with flu and pneumonia, struggling to breathe. The wife of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson wrote about her ordeal on Instagram, that she had not yet fully recovered from the chest infection, saying her strong advice was to get the flu jab, thanking nurses who cared for her. The number of patients in hospital with flu continues to rise, quadruple the figures of last winter. And temperatures tonight will once again be cold, reaching minus 15 degrees. Last night they dropped to minus 18.7 in the coldest January night for 15 years. The Met Office says the temperature was recorded in the most northern region of the Highlands. It's expected to stay chilly with an amber cold weather alert in place until Tuesday. Today, football matches have been postponed. Meanwhile, in Derbyshire, gritters were stopped from working by 200 cars double parked on a scenic route near Edale. The County Council turned to social media asking visitors to the Peak District to please move your car. Those are your latest headlines at 10 o'clock. I'll be back in 1 hour.
Welcome back. Yesterday, Wes Streeting went on the attack over rhetoric used to describe Pakistani rape gangs. He claimed that the ongoing rhetoric risks inciting mass violence similar to that of the New Zealand mosque massacre. Wes Streeting told The Guardian, "There are people in my community who have either Pakistani heritage or look different, who are now more fearful today than they were before." Unfortunately, Wes Streeting's rhetoric comments are totally out of touch with reality. The time for toe-stepping and censoring factual language to avoid offending anyone is over. It's time we confront the harsh realities, no matter how uncomfortable they might be. So, Wes, I'm talking to you directly. The censoring of factual information under the guise of it being racist is far more destructive to our society than any so-called rhetoric. By failing to address the grooming gang crisis head-on, we're allowing the continued exploitation and rape of our children. This isn't about being politically correct. It's about protecting the innocent. If our authorities had felt empowered to call out to these grooming gangs without the fear of being labelled racist, we might not be having to talk about this epidemic today. Lives could have been saved and justice could have been served much sooner. Keir Starmer's own report, Your Boss, highlighted the same language that you are using is actually the issue. Yet here we are with you asking us to dance around the truth all over again. Let me be clear, no sane person is blaming the entire Pakistani community. We know people of multiple ethnicities, including white people, are culpable. But it's crucial, given the facts, to acknowledge the prevalence of this issue within that specific cultural context. You cannot solve a problem by ignoring its roots. We've seen the incendiary damage the cover-up culture has done to this country, precisely because of the approach you, Wes, are advocating for. And to reiterate, an approach that was condemned by your own party leader's report while he led the CPS. We all need to, including yourself, call out the facts plainly and without shame. Only then, and only then, can this country begin to heal, to protect and prevent further tragedies. It's time to stop the cycle of silence and start the process of justice. But now, let's get the thoughts of my panel. We've got political consultant Suzanne Evans, author and commentator Lewis Oakley, and journalist and broadcaster Nina Misko. Listen, Nina, I missed you out the first time here.
Don't worry.
So we should start with you. Look, we've seen a series of high-profile politicians, including Dan Carden, not that long ago, Dan Carden MP, Andy Burnham and others breaking rank with Keir Starmer over this national inquiry issue, but specifically on Wes's comments. Is this not a throwback to the exact same rhetoric that Tony Blair and others allegedly used to start this whole scandal in the first place?
I don't think so. I think it's a different issue. I think he's seeing it in the light of the riots last summer. And the trouble is people will seize on facts, and so that everybody will be painted with the same brush. And I can understand if his constituents who are of Pakistani or Asian origin, you know, people will look at them. You know, any Pakistani man you will look at, just getting on a tube, looking at a Pakistani man. Are you a rapist? Are you somebody who's part of a grooming gang? So I think he's just saying, let's put the brakes on slightly. I don't think he's trying to literally whitewash it. But you know, you have to remember that this is a dreadful tragedy. It's a complete disgrace. It's an utter scandal. But it's not the whole story in this country. 1 in 13 English adults have been sexually abused as children. And the Home Office had a report in 2020 which said that the majority of gang-led sexual abusers were white. And that's nothing to do with this very specific cultural thing that's happened throughout our towns.
That's the problem, isn't it, Nina? You know, because you have white rapists, white abusers, nobody backs away from that. They're prosecuted. They get the full force of the law. The problem is that these Pakistani men have had everything swept under the carpet, and that's made
they have been prosecuted.
Justify. Well, some of them have, but there's been no prosecution. They went unprosecuted for many, many years. The girls themselves,
Keir Starmer actually changed the procedure so they could be prosecuted.
Were not taken seriously. You know, we had cases, again, that Charlie Peters revealed about fathers who tried to intervene. They were the ones prosecuted and hauled up before the police. There's been a massive attempt to sweep this under the... And that's made people justifiably angry. It's not rhetoric. It's actually unfair treatment. It's, as Nigel Farage was talking about earlier in his clip, it's two-tier policing. And that's the problem. And, yeah, I don't look at a Pakistani man and think you're a member of a grooming gang, I'll be honest. But if people thinking that, it's because, actually, they weren't treated equally. There was a kind of reverse racism that's going on, and that's now why the community is probably understandably living in fear. If they'd been treated equally in the beginning, if they'd had the full force of the law, there wouldn't be this discrimination.
I think there is that feeling of two-tier justice being said, which has really incited people's... Yeah, I think people's emotions are up as a result of it. But would you say Wes Streeting's comment saying this is going to incite massacres, is that inflammatory in itself, Lewis?
I think that's an interesting point. So, number one, to your point, I would say, look, stigma does stick. So there is definitely a thing of people think, well, they're all like it. We see that with other demographics of, you know, priests and churches and that kind of stuff, and people, you know, suspect by and large, and of course that's not going on that scale. But the problem is, as you're saying, this has been covered up for so long, so almost coming out and saying, well, hold on, we can't be prejudiced, it almost inflames the situation a little bit more, where it's like, think of the girls, those are the people that we're looking at. And I do think the reality of the situation is politicians need to be the ones that are coming down and taking the flak here and saying, look, if police officers don't think that they can do their jobs properly, I will find out. I will go in there and do this. And I think that almost takes a bit of the fire that Wes Streeting is talking about out of the situation, because it's like, oh, they've got it. They're taking care of this. Actually, they're going to look at it, and if Wes Streeting's going in, I know it'll be sorted out. That's what you want, and that's not sort of, I think, what we're getting.
Well, Suzanne, would you think that we should see more leaders from the Pakistani community, for example, coming out and speaking about this? Because would that not take the fuel out of the fire here?
Absolutely would. And that's the other thing that's been very obvious, unfortunately, right from the beginning when these stories broke so many years ago now, is that you didn't have that condemnation from the, I'm afraid, very often self-appointed male community leaders in this demographic. They didn't come out against it. They wanted to keep their own noses clean and hide it under the carpet as well, and that's a problem. But just going back to what Wes Streeting said, you know, it's completely tone deaf. As was what David Lammy said earlier on a radio interview. He said, oh, I'm fed up of talking about this, basically. I'm paraphrasing. I'm fed up about talking this. Ask me about something else. Completely tone deaf. Labour MP Dan Carden, he's got it right. He's got the tone right. He's recognised what needs to be done, and good for him, because it takes a lot of guts to break away from your party.
It really does. I mean, I sometimes get the impression that people like Andy Burnham are perhaps, you know, I don't know, doing this for their own political careers. I'm not sure. But Nina, listen.
I think there is a little leadership challenge thing going on, but that's another issue.
You know, Wes Streeting's trying to balance, you know, people like Robert Jenrick, who is so nakedly ambitious, he could eat himself, quite frankly. But his rhetoric has been so over the top that you do need other people to say other things to balance. You really do.
Well, so I was going to ask, you know, is this just Labour trying to counterbalance people like Jenrick, or are we seeing a situation where Labour are losing the communication of the country, where the country feels so strongly about this topic? They just want to say it as it is, Nina.
I think that's partially it, but he may well just have many, many constituents who are Pakistanis who feel completely, you know, terrified by what's going on.
Well, that's another interesting point, isn't it? Because Wes Streeting, of course, is very much under threat at the general election from the independent Muslim votes. He won his seat by 600 votes. So he's obviously feeling the pressure, I think, from that.
And it's not just Wes Streeting, it's Yvette Cooper and others as well, Lewis.
I think it's multifaceted.
Part of it?
I think it's multifaceted, but what I've noticed with this particular Labour government is they just have the blinders on and they're just going with their own agenda. They haven't U-turned on anything yet. And I think that almost these, what you could describe as left field issues, things that weren't in their manifesto, things they didn't plan on, they almost just like, well, get rid of that. We just want to crack on with what we want to do. And it's like, well, that's just not how politics works. Sometimes things you thought had been dealt with, obviously not very well, come up. Like, it was literally this time last year, it was the Mr. Bates documentary, and that brought up the whole thing of the post office again, which had been out. We all knew about it, but it pulled it into the public consciousness, and that's what they've got to do. They've got to be seen to be reacting to the British public's needs in that moment.
They're not. They're
I think they're still in their early stages because they waited for 14 years and they're desperate to move on with this, and they haven't quite got the tone right. I think, you know, Keir Starmer is not, like Farage, as we said earlier, a natural politician, and he needs to somehow get a grip of that and communicate better.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with you. But thanks to the panel here for your comments. We're going to be back with you shortly for the papers and other things too. But coming up, more on this scandal with a renowned child abuse solicitor who worked on a team representing more than 100 survivors in Rotherham. This is Ben Leo Tonight with Alex Armstrong, only on GB News.
I'm Michelle Dewberry, and this is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
GB News Breakfast, every day from 6 a.m.
Now, we're going to introduce you to Liam Wildish. Liam, well, I'd like to think he's a friend of mine because I follow him on Instagram, on TikTok there as well.
You're a big fan, aren't you?
Big fan, because there's what he does. He's a cleaner. He cleans signs. But the thing is, he's not employed by councils or whatever. He does this voluntarily. And you sort of think to yourself, well, who cleans these signs? Why have these signs been allowed to get into this terrible state of disrepair and filthiness?
So, basically, long story short, about 6 years ago, I used to be a window cleaner. In the community where I lived, I noticed all of the road signs were filthy, and I was perfectly equipped to clean them. So, basically, I cleaned the road signs as a bit of a thank you to the community and sort of make a little bit of awareness of my window cleaning business at the time. Sort of cleans up the area, makes the road safer, and that's kind of how that started. And people found it like a really satisfying sort of approach. So that sort of led on to today of a video in cleaning the dirty road signs and making sort of satisfying content with it as well.
What is the equipment? What have we got here?
So this is a water-fed pole system connected to a backpack, which is what feeds the water through the end of the brush there. It's perfectly equipped to basically remove this green dirty, it's like a mildew build-up that you get on the signs. As you can see, this is like extremely effective at removing so
GB News viewers, if they spot a particularly grisly sign in their area, then they can get in touch.
They can do, yeah.
And Liam Wildish, the sign guy, can sort you out.
If you find Liam the sign guy online, drop me a message, let me know. and I'll add you to my list of places.
GB News, the People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
I'm Ellie Costello, and thank you so much for joining us here on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
This is Ben Leo Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong, live on GB News. Now, more on this deeply troubling issue that continues to affect communities across the country: grooming gangs. They manipulate vulnerable young people, often in targeted and organised operations. The victims are subject to abuse, coercion and trafficking, which many continue to suffer in silence. Our Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, has warned of the use of inflammatory language over grooming gang risks vilifying entire communities. He also says he fears rhetoric could lead to atrocities similar to the Christchurch mosque shootings in New Zealand, which killed more than 50 people. Wes Streeting told The Guardian, "There are people in my community who have either Pakistani heritage or look different who are more fearful today than they were before." Are those legitimate concerns or mere whitewashing of the issue? I'm joined now by child abuse solicitor David Greenwood, who has worked on a team representing more than 100 survivors in Rotherham. David, welcome to the show. Listen, Wes has been pretty forthcoming with his statement in The Guardian. He's reiterated it on X. Is rhetoric too inflammatory right now? Are we, offending Pakistani communities? Are we tarring them all with the same brush?
Well, I think this Wes Streeting is blowing the whole thing out of proportion. To compare the situation with potentially causing a massacre like we saw in New Zealand is way out of proportion. The last that I knew of the law, we had freedom of speech in this country. We can exercise it how we like, so long as we don't break the law. There are laws against inflaming racial hatred, and I'm sure that the police will clamp down on people in the same way that they did with the woman who made some awful comments about the Stockport issue, and we'll arrest people and lock them up if they break the law. I think he's gone way over the top with this. Yeah, it's fair to say that that the grooming gangs issue has been an issue for a long time, and it hasn't been really grasped properly yet. But to say that most reasonable people in this country are tarring whole communities with the same brush is a distortion of the truth. Most reasonable people in this country recognise that it's a small group of criminals that are committing these acts, and to do anything other than call them criminals is just not right at the moment. We simply don't have the data to say who's doing it. There are Eastern Europeans doing it. There are white people doing it.
Yeah, it's a pretty broad brush when it comes to offences in this country, and I was saying that in my monologue. How do you, look, you've worked with hundreds of victims over your time on this sort of topic. How do you think they would receive Wes Streeting's comments in The Guardian?
Well, the women that I've worked with and spoken to, as you can imagine, have fairly strong views about this. They want it to stop. They want to protect future generations, and so everything that can be thrown at it, I think most of them would want that. But we have to recognise that they, unfortunately, have been subjected to this awful crime, and will have a way of looking at it. we have to deal with it through the prism of law enforcement. And unless we're reasonable with our law enforcement, the whole thing is going to get out of control. We are going to have something like some kind of terrorist activity on our shores. We don't want that. So we need to recognise that most people in the country view this as simply a crime. The police need to step up. To be fair to the police, they have been doing some really excellent work in tracking down these grooming gangs, certainly in the north of England, where I live, and have done a good job. We need to do more. We need to gather more data, and we need to break the gangs up before they even start.
There's been widespread critique of Robert Jenrick, who's also used language, saying that there are certain people coming to the country that have alien cultures. Do you think that's what Wes is talking about? Do you think that politicians are the ones sort of spreading this, what they would call inflammatory language? Or do you think that Robert Jenrick is saying it plainly?
No, definitely. The comments like were made by Robert Jenrick don't help the situation. The girls that I've spoken to, the women that I speak to, don't want to have this issue kicked around like a political football. This is serious. These are serious crimes that are happening on our streets. We don't want to have it, used for political gain. This is a law enforcement issue, not a political issue.
David, look, I want to thank you very much for your time tonight. This is a very important topic, so thank you for coming on to talk to me today. Coming up, my panel joins me shortly to discuss tomorrow's front pages, hot off the press. This is Ben Leo Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong, only on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Some of us did manage to see some sunshine today, but others have been seeing quite persistent fog, and that will be lingering overnight and into Sunday. Particularly across areas of eastern England, it is going to become quite dense overnight. Northern Ireland as well could see some quite widespread fog by the time we reach Sunday morning. There'll be a spot of drizzle from some of this cloud in between, but if you hold on to the clear skies in the east, it is certainly going to be a very chilly night. A frost here, but something a touch milder to start off the second half of the weekend further towards the west. And we really do have a quite noticeable east-west split in conditions as we head throughout the day. That frost and fog will be lingering into the morning for those eastern areas, but you'll notice how different those temperatures are further towards the west, 7-8 degrees Celsius. Do be aware of this fog as it continues to persist into the daytime. There could be some travel issues around if you are heading outside at all, but again, another east-west split across parts of Scotland as well. Particularly in the west, the winds are going to start picking up as we head throughout the day. Gales developing for the Outer Hebrides and parts of the Highlands as we move towards the afternoon and evening period as we see outbreaks of rain arriving here. It'll be a calmer day for England and Wales, and there will again be some sunshine once the fog eventually clears its way off. But temperatures will struggle here again. 3 to 4 degrees Celsius for some of us, but again 7 to 8 possible further towards the northwest. And as we head into Monday, the pressure system squeezing together will provide a very strong southwesterly wind. So it is going to turn quite gusty for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but it's also going to be fielding in some much milder conditions with these outbreaks of rain. So throughout the next week, we're actually going to have a noticeable north to south split in our temperatures. Not the one you'd normally expect, because in fact it is going to be the northern areas that see the mildest conditions, reaching double-digit figures as we move into the week, but still around average in the south. Bye-bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent? I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect. And then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is Ben Leo Tonight with me, Alex Armstrong, only on GB News. Now it's time to bring you tomorrow's newspapers today, tonight even, in the most entertaining paper review on telly. The very first front pages have just been delivered fresh and the press pack. We've got The Observer. They are leading with no negotiation on children's safety. Labour warns big tech. That's perhaps quite timely given all of the press. We've got The Independent next. Reeves is accused of selling out to China in order to rescue the economy. The Sunday Express is leading with IVF miracle powered by AI tech, a game-changing new treatment to spare women years of heartache. And then over to the Sunday Telegraph, Reeves to wage war on waste as Labour critics circle. Private experts drafted in to find savings as MPs question the Chancellor's performance. The Sun is leading on a story, a Max George exclusive. I made my will on the phone before heart operation. And the Mail. The Mail is heading up. A controversial ex-Number 10 advisor plans his own party. Government sources say he's colluding with Starmer baiting tycoon. And Musk and Cummings in plot to sabotage UK politics. I think we should pick on that one a little bit because obviously Dominic Cummings has been out of the sphere, should we say, since Boris booted him, and he's been on the sidelines since. He did make these big statements about starting a political party. Obviously, I'm joined by my panel. They're back in the studio here. Suzanne, come on. Is Musk now found a new favourite? He's moved on from Nigel?
Honestly, I'm so sick to death of people starting up new political parties. The chance of a new political party getting any success are so infinitesimally small. The only reason Reform is doing so well is, of course, because it was Brexit Party before that and UKIP before that, and it's had kind of 30 years under its belt. So I think the story's a load of rubbish myself, to be honest. Dominic Cummings is helping orchestrate Elon Musk's vitriolic attacks on British politics. They talk to each other on Twitter, apparently.
Oh, really?
I talk to lots of people on Twitter. It doesn't mean I'm in cahoots.
Well, actually, it says WhatsApp, so that's more intimate.
WhatsApp, OK, well, I talk to a lot of people on WhatsApp.
Yeah, but that's more intimate. The thing is, I thought Elon Musk was getting his script directly from Tommy Robinson, frankly. Cummings, I think that's an incredible surprise. But the very fact that Elon Musk is fiddling about with our politics and the politics in Europe, I think is dreadful. The fact that the man is a genius, he's the richest man in the world, he's a wonderful entrepreneur, but that does not make him a political leader. Charisma did not make Boris Johnson a fabulous leader.
But billionaires interfere in our...
I mean, OK, yeah, I agree with you on that, but it did get him into government, didn't it?
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, billionaires interfere in our politics all the time, right?
That's wrong.
Well, it is wrong, but it is just the reality of the situation. Look, let me be a bit controversial here. Look, Elon Musk is very powerful. Dominic Cummings is the inside out of Downing Street. I say more parties, let the public decide. Let them put together a little party and let's see what happens. More options are better than the two-party system does not work. So we're going to have some options.
The thing is, the world is being dictated to by billionaires, and that seems to be wrong. For years we've whinged about Rupert Murdoch, who has influenced so much in this country through his media empire, and there's a billionaire kind of influencing us. Now, Trump is coming in with Elon Musk and other billionaires, and that's all that they have in common. It's money. And that's, Musk is neurodivergent, which doesn't give you necessarily empathy for people. And you can't just run things on a business basis. It has to be people, not just profit.
Listen, Nina, I'd agree with you on that, but George Soros has been involved in domestic European politics for a very, very long time. I went over to Hungary just not that long ago, and they were completely up in arms about his interference.
So this is my thing, is if you're going to have billionaires meddling in our politics, you can't help it. Wouldn't you rather have a Musk who's just kind of like just putting out his thoughts on X rather than having secret meetings in Downing Street and we don't know what's being said and what's going on? At least we know what Musk thinks.
Suzanne, that's a good point. I mean, is it not a good thing that we know exactly what he thinks so we can hold him accountable for that, as opposed to the opposite?
I totally agree. You know, before the general election, we had Bill Gates. Who knows what he was talking to Keir Starmer about? At least Musk is open and upfront about this. And I'm sorry, as a private person, I will say what I like about American politics or Hungarian politics or Turkish politics, whatever I like. Everyone has a right to an opinion on somebody else's politics. And I don't think Elon Musk should be excluded for that just because he happens to be the richest man in the world. He's got every right to express his opinion.
He's every right to express his opinion, but with his opinion comes influence, because he has access to power through Trump, and he has access to because he has his own media empire, he has enormous influence, global influence,
and that's the same.
Yes,
so
never mind know about. But the thing
you
is,
don't know what other people are doing behind the scenes. Billionaires, multi-millionaires, they're lobbying government all the time.
This has gone way beyond just sort of expressing his opinion.
Can we perhaps all agree that we should just put a blanket ban on too many powerful people, or do you think that we should have them involved? Suzanne, go on, final word.
Everybody has got to be allowed to express their opinion on anything they like. That's my fundamental point, and I like Elon Musk expressing his opinion. I mostly agree with him, but at least he's open and honest about it.
Okay.
At least he's open and honest about it. Other shady figures, we don't know what they're doing and who they're saying to what. To whom?
Well, quite. I certainly agree with you on that one, Suzanne. Right, but look, now on this note, according to a poll published by Opinion, 53% of people believe Musk's involvement in British politics is having a negative impact, with only 12% in support. When it comes to Musk's comments on grooming gangs, 47% of respondents deemed them unhelpful, compared to just 26% who felt they were beneficial. So over the past few weeks, Musk has launched a series of attacks on Prime Minister Keir Starmer, particularly over his stance on a national inquiry into grooming gangs. Musk also expressed support for Reform UK, but then shocked the world by saying Nigel Farage should step aside. Nina, should we listen to Elon Musk? Should Nigel Farage listen to Elon Musk?
Nobody should listen. They should listen to him and then just discount him.
So you'd even go as far to say that you think Nigel Farage should stay?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm not saying that at all. Nigel Farage is like a cockroach. He will be very hard to dislodge. But the thing with Musk is, he is a complete hypocrite. He blew open the grooming gang scandal. He blew that open, and yet his best buddy is Donald Trump, a man whose attitude to women is despicable, who's been convicted of sexual assault on women, and this is just, to me, untenable.
OK, quick word from both of you on that poll. What do you make of that, Lewis?
It's almost near that 52-48 figure, isn't it?
Is it Elon?
No, it's wider than that. Only what was the percentage of people?
12%.
12%.
OK, 12% for it.
Not at all Brexit.
Look, he's sparked a discussion. That's fine. He's said a lot of. He's tweeting about 10 times an hour. So how much can you take him? How much can you take him seriously?
Go on, Suzanne. Final word.
So I think it's only a small poll, 2,000 people. But then again, I think it's probably right. And Musk reminds me of Trump when he was in office last time. He'd have had a much better time at president if he'd stayed off Twitter. I think Elon's overdoing it, like Trump did.
Interesting stuff. OK, well, now, following those shocking scenes of wildfires in Los Angeles, a fire department chief in the area has gone viral after she was caught saying this.
You want to see somebody that responds to your house, your emergency, whether it's a medical call or a fire call, that looks like you. It gives that person a little bit more ease, knowing that somebody might understand their situation better. Is she strong enough to do this? Or you couldn't carry my husband out of a fire, which my response is, he got himself in the wrong place if I have to carry him out of a fire.
OK. Is this what you'd want to hear, Suzanne, if you were in LA?
I've got no doubt that she'd be able to carry me out of a fire. I have to say, she looks like one.
Did you just assume her gender? How dare you?
I think it's pretty obvious. I think she was promoting women in the fire force, wasn't she? But I think, she's a very strong woman, clearly, obviously. I have no worries personally.
Look, as someone that's bisexual and has done a lot of LGBT campaigning, I always caution against doing something like that, where it's like that. But you need to be about efficiency, and yes, we need to make sure we're not discriminating against people and encouraging people to pursue paths they might not have otherwise thought of. But when you're saying, it doesn't really matter if I can carry someone out of a building because look at my identity.
I mean,
it's people like me that are trying to move that movement forward, but in a logical way that just kind of recoil and say, oh, you just walked into it.
Yeah, Nina, this is silly, isn't it?
Well, you can understand. People get very sensitive and they want to sort of hit out at sometimes, and so why not? But no, I mean, but I'm with Suzanne. She could possibly lift both of us at the same time.
One on each shoulder, I reckon.
If you're married, then I don't think she'd be taking your husband. I think that's the problem, right? I think he put himself there in that house fire. I mean, that's the difficult stuff, really, isn't it?
It's very sad. A friend of mine, someone I used to work for, lost his house.
Yeah.
In California previously. He said the worst thing was losing all those family photographs.
Yeah, it's always the memories, isn't it, that really get people in the end.
Yeah.
It's the photo albums you wanted to grab.
That's why I have all the photo albums backed up on 2 separate...
Wow. It's good advice for those watching at home. But now, Boris Johnson has been consistently vocal in his support for Ukraine over the past 3 years or so. But earlier today, while speaking to a Lithuanian outlet Delphi, he did not hold back in delivering some choice language to Vladimir Putin over his war in Eastern Europe. Take a listen.
He needs to understand that Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, none of these countries are part of the Russian Imperium anymore, and nor is Ukraine. It's over, 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 over. No more empire, Vladimir, you excuse my language. Okay.
I mean, I think I've seen Boris outraged before, but that's got to be a whole new level even for Boris.
Just watching that, I just looked and I thought, yesterday's man, who cares? It just looks like...
Suzanne, yesterday's man, is that right?
Top tip, I charge for this kind of advice normally, but number one tip, if you're on the telly, don't swear, ever.
Yeah, I do my best. I did slip up a couple of weeks ago here, actually, though, so I have to apologise for that. Lewis, I mean, do you think, I mean, listen, there's a sensible debate to be had about Ukraine. Obviously, Trump is going to come in and say, you know, I want to end this war. There's reports saying he's going to meet with Vladimir Putin really soon. What do you make of this statement by Boris? Is he going to come at odds with Trump?
Look, let's all just be hopeful that Trump can pull off a miracle there. But I think with regard to Boris, as you say, it's just yesterday's man. It's like, you know, you had your shot at this. It ended spectacularly badly for you. I'm not really interested in his comments on this.
And the thing is, looking back, how many times did Boris shelter behind Ukraine's bloodstained skirts? Every time there was a problem for Boris. 2 hours later, I've just had a conversation with Vladimir, and you know there'd be always something about Ukraine. He just used it as a political to try and make himself look like a mini Churchill.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like prime ministers in the modern day seem to be flying around the world. I mean, they're all guilty of this, rather than focusing on the issues at home. And we've got plenty of them here. I mean, this government is in public opinion turmoil at the moment, and you'd think, you know, Keir Starmer would be getting less trips. You think during COVID, Boris Johnson wouldn't have, you know, been going to more Cobra meetings, for example. I just feel like maybe our political elite just aren't in touch anymore with the public.
I think that's right. I think too many people don't really have a real job before they go into politics. They go into politics very young. They've got no life experience. They end up climbing the ranks, having done PPE, working for an MP, end up being Prime Minister and actually completely out of touch.
I don't think they're the same calibre they used to be, but you've also got to think the game has really changed now. They used to be able to put out a soundbite and that was it, the papers would cover it. Now they're being, you know, shown clips from 3 years ago where they said the complete opposite of what they're saying now. They can't sort of target certain communities of working class and say sort of different things. So it is trickier in the modern world, and everyone is so empowered with social media now. So I feel for them slightly. Although, you know, get on with it. It's a job you applied for.
The calibre of politicians has dropped. Boris started it. He just weeded out all the old guard who knew what they were doing.
Is this not the problem when you have this massive sweeping majority? I think we did. I mean, I know some people who won seats in the 2019 election as well as this one. Do you just get this class of perhaps, you know, political politicians in our parliament that just aren't
Well,
up to scratch.
I don't think political parties select people properly.
No, they don't,
They don't do their due diligence. They select people who are going to be faithful. Yeah, absolutely. Spads, people who've done the grist. They're not necessarily the best people.
There are
MPs.
wonderful people who dedicate their lives to the service of their constituents, but they are few and far between.
Yeah. Politics don't want people who think for themselves.
Okay.
Leaders want people who will toe the party line.
OK, moving on. Anyway, coming up, my panel joins me shortly to discuss the rest of tomorrow's front pages hot off the press. Plus, my panel gives us their greatest Britain and Union jackass. Don't go anywhere. This is Ben Leo tonight with me, Alex Armstrong.
I forecast a perfect holiday in the sun.
Weather looking good then?
For sure, and no worries about our travel insurance.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
For anyone looking for winter sun, I can report very mixed conditions across the Med. Unsettled in Italy with showers in Greece, but across much of Iberia it's fine. Plenty of sunny skies, breezy towards the Canaries. And we've got this area of low pressure moving through Italy. That's going to bring unseasonably windy weather and outbreaks of rain with snow over the mountains. Meanwhile, showery conditions and a strong wind, but mild for Greece for the time of year. And then it turns more settled widely across the Med next week.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GBNews Travel Destinations Forecast.
GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
Should we talk about the weather?
Yes.
Because apparently, all of this weather is leading to bunk-off Monday, Dawn.
Yeah, this is the front page of the Daily Star, which is a very attractive picture of a potato on a couch. So everyone...
As if we haven't done enough of that over the last...
Everyone working from home today, hope you're having a nice time, because we're obviously not. Yeah, so sickies will double today. Bunk-off Monday. Millions of workers call in ill to avoid the snow. Now, obviously, for many people, it's the first day back after the Christmas and New Year break as well. Many people have had 2 weeks off. And the weather gives you a bit of an excuse to maybe extend that break. Now, look, don't get me wrong, up in the north it is terribly bad, and we had airports shut at the weekend, football games being potentially called off, etc., etc., and it was awful. However, in many parts of the country, certainly in London and the South East, it's just rain. There's just puddles out there, people.
There's no excuse.
Just go to work.
Down here.
And the security guy said he can't work from home. He can't work from home. He's got to come in, isn't he?
Well, there are so many. It does tend to be the working class jobs as well, the ones that you can't do from home. The people running the supermarkets, the people running the NHS, the people, the postmen, the dustbin people. I mean, all these people are the ones that have to get out there no matter what the weather and get on with it.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's all these, and we had stories over the other day, didn't we, about people working from home from a beach in Ibiza.
Exactly.
And from Barbados. People working for local councils.
Yeah, I've got a few friends in corporate jobs today who've got the week off work.
Oh, dear.
And have you affected by the weather over the week? No, not at all. Well, yes. My golf was cancelled yesterday.
Oh, my God! How did you...
Snowfall, my golf was cancelled, a mighty woe, couldn't get it out there. Oh, can you believe it?
What?
Honestly,
no. How did you...
Love them. My grandkids love the weather.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Welcome back to GB News. I'm Alex Armstrong, and it's the Ben Leo Tonight Show. It's time for the liveliest paper review on telly. We've got some more front pages for you. Let's have a look at the Mirror first. We've got a big piece here, a big hit piece on Nigel Farage. 9 jobs, Nigel. Nigel Farage juggles 8 part-time jobs on top of being an MP. The side hustles have earned the Reform UK leader £571,000 in less than 6 months. Wow, OK. And next we've got the Sunday Times. Pressure grows on Starmer to sack minister. Bangladeshi leader condemns plane robbery amid revelations over Sadiq family finances. I believe that's in reference to Tulip Sadiq. Quite some shocking stuff.
Yeah,
going.
she's my MP. I didn't vote for her.
Oh, interesting, really?
She should have been suspended. She should have gone by now. It's insane that she's still there.
Yeah, I know there's been lots
insane.
of stuff actually happen about her time in there, but I would really love to talk about this Mirror front page, because this is quite the hit piece on Nigel. This is like a led by donkeys level hit piece, like big letters, 9 jobs, Nigel. Nina, what do you make of it?
Well, you know, frankly, it shouldn't happen. You know, if you're an MP and a serious MP, then you should be looking after your constituents. You shouldn't have the time to do all these other jobs and coin it like that. I think that's completely wrong.
Let me be a bit controversial there. Like, if, you know, people can do more than 1 job. I do 6 different jobs. It is possible, right?
Running a country.
Neither is he. But, you know...
You're having difficulty getting your children to brush their teeth and go to bed. Don't you start.
But if people don't like it, they can vote him out. As long as the jobs don't conflict, as long as he's not got a job that means he's doing something, you know, he shouldn't be in the MP job, you know, it's fine.
I mean, I'm not surprised. Nigel's always done stuff on the side.
Yeah, busy man.
You know, I'm quite envious, actually. If only my worst paid job paid over 91 grand.
Wow, there you go. You've got to work hard these days to make some money, but Nigel's doing a great job. Anyway, it's time to reveal today's greatest Britain and Union jackass. Suzanne, who have you got for us on your UJ?
My UJ is Wes Streeting.
GB!
Oh, GB!
Sorry,
no, I'm giving it away now.
GB.
Right, OK,
Well, we'll
so
come back.
my GB is Morrison's, because they've stuck up for farmers today, the supermarket. I'm kind of slightly dubious about this one, because I don't think supermarkets always treat farmers fairly, but good on Morrison's for saying the family farm tax is wrong.
Fantastic. Lewis?
Charlie Peters, GB's own.
There you go.
I thought, you know, what he's doing, it's a scary job for a journalist to do that, and he was doing it long before Elon Musk brought this back to the front pages. And I think, you know, the empathy he's had with the victims and really pushing to try and get some answers there and how much he cares about it. So really great. And I think when we see so many people turn a blind eye to this, it's really important that we celebrate the people that didn't.
Absolutely. Nina?
Mine's a double award, and it's Harry and Meghan.
Oh,
okay. Quietly doing their bit to help the victims of the LA fires. They posted all sorts of useful information online. They've opened their house to friends who've had their homes destroyed, and they drove to Pasadena, which is about 100 miles away, to comfort the victims. And the mayor of Pasadena said it was marvellous, and they really helped.
OK. Who shall we give this to? You know what, Charlie Peters, we've had the documentary tonight. I don't know if he's won, actually, quite recently or not, but you know what, even if he has, let's give it.
He's done a brilliant
Greatest
job.
Britain
Amazing
today
job.
is Charlie Peters, everybody. Fantastic
Well
stuff.
deserved.
All right, shall we get on with your Union Jackals? We haven't spoiled it yet. Go on.
Yeah, so Wes Streeting, I got deja vu here. Yeah, it's Wes Streeting for making inane, ridiculous comments on grooming gangs, basically trying to sweep it under the carpet, which is what everybody is complaining about doing.
Yeah, we've spoken a lot about Wes tonight, of course. We might chew on that a little bit more, but go on, Lewis.
I see you Wes Streeting, and I raise you all the MPs who voted against or abstained from that grooming gang inquiry. I cover the news all the time, and there's not often a story that happens where you just say, I can't read this. You see the headline that they did that, and I can't read it, and I can't look at it. It really gets me.
Yeah, this was what I did my monologue on tonight. It's like a shame on all of them.
Yeah.
I mean, there were so many MPs out there who literally made such a song and dance about, you know, we must back a national inquiry or we must back this bill. And then, you know, even Keir Starmer didn't show up, and he was saying what a crucial, was imploring Tory MPs to go and vote for it. And Suella Braverman didn't show up as well. She had diary commitments. Anyway, Nina, over to you.
My union jackass is Liz Truss.
At a time like this.
For issuing legal threats to Keir Starmer for his supposed defamatory remarks that she crashed the economy.
Oh, but that was brilliant.
I mean, the thing is, are we all now going to get legal letters? Because we all know that she didn't.
She didn't. She didn't.
Well, I think, listen, I would say if you're going to criticise Liz Truss, you have got to criticise Rachel Reeves. But I'm going to give this one to who should we give it to, guys? The abstainers. It's got to be it's got to be the MP abstainers, I think, given everything today. Anyway,
double win.
All right, that's it for tonight, everybody. I will be back again tomorrow from 9 p.m. Thank you so much for being with me tonight. But next up, it's Headliners After Your Weather with Jonathan Vautry. Thank you very much to our lovely panel, and good night. See you tomorrow.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hello there, good evening. This is your GB News weather update provided by the Met Office. Some of us did manage to see some sunshine today, but others have been seeing quite persistent fog, and that'll be lingering overnight and into Sunday. Particularly across areas of eastern England, it is going to become quite dense overnight. Northern Ireland as well could see some quite widespread fog by the time we reach Sunday morning. There'll be also a drizzle from some of this cloud in between, but if you hold on to the clear skies in the east, it is certainly going to be a very chilly night, a frost here, but something a touch milder to start off the second half of the weekend further towards the west. And we really do have a quite noticeable east-west split in conditions as we head throughout the day. That frost and fog will be lingering into the morning for those eastern areas, but you'll notice how different those temperatures are further towards the west, 7-8 degrees Celsius. Do be aware of this fog as it continues to persist into the daytime. There could be some travel issues around if you are heading outside at all, but again, another east-west split across parts of Scotland as well. Particularly in the west, the winds are going to start picking up as we head throughout the day. Gales developing for the Outer Hebrides and parts of the Highlands as we move towards the afternoon and evening period as we see outbreaks of rain arriving here. It'll be a calmer day for England and Wales, and there will again be some sunshine once the fog eventually clears its way off. But temperatures will struggle here again, 3 to 4 degrees Celsius for some of us, but again 7 to 8 possible further towards the northwest. And as we head into Monday, the pressure system squeezing together will provide a very strong southwesterly wind. So it is going to turn quite gusty for Northern Ireland and Scotland, but it's also going to be fielding in some much milder conditions with these outbreaks of rain. So throughout the next week, we're actually going to have a noticeable north to south split in our temperatures. Not the one you'd normally expect, because in fact it is going to be the northern areas that see the mildest conditions, reaching double-digit figures as we move into the week, but still around average in the south. Bye-bye.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Don't miss your chance to win our biggest cash prize ever, an incredible £50,000. That's tax-free cash to spend on anything you like this year. What would you spend it on? £50,000 could buy those treats you've always dreamed of having. And just one entry into the Great British Giveaway really could make £50,000 cash all yours. For another chance to win, text cash to 63232. One entry costs £2 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63232. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network